Welcome back to Destination Americas. This is week 7, and this is our last week that we're studying the United States. So that's gone really quickly. Today we're doing California and the Western states, and then tomorrow we're doing Alaska and Hawaii. So it seems like it drags on, I know, the whole semester, but things really do go quickly. So just a few reminders. Next week is the reading week. On your learning plan, it says winter break. You can call it that. You can call it reading week. It doesn't matter, but there's no classes. So you take that time to relax, to recharge, take a break, recharge your bodies, but also your minds. Make sure you relax and because mental health is just as important as physical health. So make sure you relax as much as you can during that week, but also remember to study because the following week you have your second module test. And that module test, those are the big ones, the ones that are worth 20% of your final mark. That is the week after, next week, after the reading week, and that will be covering information just from our second module, which is the United States. So you won't find anything on module test number 2 about Canada. It's only about the States, only about the USA. During that week, week 8, the week after your winter break, during that week, the first class will be an independent review period where we will not meet on Zoom. I've created a PowerPoint for you to help you study for that module test number 2. And then the Thursday class of that week will be the module test number 2. And it's going to be the same as module test number 1. The format, like the way the questions are written, it will be multiple choice. The last question is going to be the exact same as in your first module test. So maybe start thinking of what you would write. The last question is, what destination did we learn about in class during this module, so in the USA, that you'd like to visit and why? So remember to type the why, the reason you'd like to go. And I will, now let me see if I can do this without stopping. Oh yeah, okay, here we go. So just wanted to show you the module test number 2 review PowerPoint. Again, will be on will be in week 8, so not next week during reading week, but the week after that. This will be your first class. So the Wednesday evening at 7, we will not meet on Zoom. I'll put out an announcement. I'll put out a reminder just so because that is 2 weeks from now, so you might forget. But the way that you use the PowerPoint, it's very important. You have to download it, and then you have to go, actually you can see my screen, so I'll do it this way for you first. You have to go to the top left of your screen and click the start from the beginning button, like you're going to present something. Otherwise, it won't work properly. It's very specific the way I've built it. So click to move forward. It just tells you, remember to open it in presentation mode, click to move forward. And then it guides you through how you're going to study for your module test number 2. So first you have left column, right column, United States of America. Over on the right, how many states is in that? So you go through each one and kind of remember continental. That means the continent, which ones are attached to North America. That would be 49 and so on. So then you click to reveal the answers. Then, for example, how you navigate through the rest. Here we see clearly. Oh, sure. Yeah, I just got a message. Can you show it again? So you'll have this open on your computer. That's the main thing. You have to download this file, open it on your computer, and open it in presentation mode, which the little picture shows you how to do. So we'll click once and it brings you to the next slide. And then you just follow the instructions. Match the right numbers with the answers and then click to reveal the answers. So how many states is in the country of the United States of America? That I think is 50. So I click once and it tells me that I'm right. Continental US, remember that's the states that are attached to the continent of North America. So you have the country of the states, the main area, but also Alaska. And that gives you 49 states. Contiguous states are the ones that all touch each other. They're all neighbors. That that does not include Alaska or Hawaii because they don't touch the other states. So that's called contiguous states. There's 48. And then New England, you have 6. So then you'll click one more time to go forward. Now we have a map of New York City. And it shows you a little explanation. Make sure you read it all. It says this map shows the neighborhoods of New York called boroughs. Using the clues on the right, which I'm covering up here with my video, but there now you can see it. Click on the correct borough to proceed through the slides. If you choose correctly, you'll see a new question. If you choose incorrectly, you'll return to this screen. So remember, this is open on your computer. Click on the most populated borough. So you have 5 options: the Bronx, Manhattan, Staten Island, Brooklyn, or Queens. And we learned in class that Manhattan is the most densely populated, but it doesn't have the most people. The most people is Brooklyn. So we'll click on Brooklyn. Okay, now if I clicked the wrong one, click on the borough where you'd find the most visited attraction in the United States. Well, we know that that is Times Square. So if I think Times Square is in Staten Island, it says, please try again, and you go back to the first slide of questions. So click on the most populated borough. Where is the most visited thing? What's the smallest? How do you take a ferry? And then you get through that section. So this is how you'll go through independently. Like you'll do this on your own as you study for the module test. So let's see. I don't want you to see that too much. And then similarly with the map, you see, click on the Florida destination that is not near a beach. That was one of your questions on the destination quiz. And the answer, well, Miami's at a beach, it's on the coast. Sarasota is on the coast, and Key West is on the coast. So Orlando must be the answer. It's right in the middle of the state. But if I chose, for example, Miami, it says, please try again, and I have to click Orlando to move forward. Then you have map work with similar questions, so I would click where I think it is. If I get it wrong, I'd go back to that screen, and so on. So, whoops, Green Mountains, there, White Mountains, there, Graceland, there. You know what I mean, like that's how you get through it. And then a couple more questions. Remember the flag of Texas? It's important because that's where the state gets its nickname from, the Lone Star State. Lone means you're all alone, there's just one of you. So that would mean that the star, the flag with 1 star, for example, and then it tells you yes. If you get it wrong, it tells you no. And that's the end. So yes, we went through that very quickly, but the reason is because you'll do that by yourself. You'll do that alone. If you'd like to study with friends, of course, you can study with friends as well. When I say independent, I mean independent of me. You don't need me to do that with you. So that's during week 8. This is week 7 we're in right now. Next week doesn't count as a number. Like next week is reading week. It's winter break, so that's not week 8. The following week, which is February 28th to March 4th, that's going to be week 8. And that's when we start, well, actually, that's your test, of course. And then following that, we start moving away from Canada and the United States. Things get really interesting and really exotic. So I'm looking forward to that. Okay, I believe everybody's here from the test. It's now 7:20. No frantic emails. So let's start our regular lesson of the day. where we are talking about California and the Western states. So before I forget, I will make sure to launch the poll. Have you been? So today, in case you're wondering what the Western states include, today we're going to California, South Dakota, Wyoming, Washington State, Oregon, Idaho, Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, and Utah. It's a lot of places. So let me know if you've been in the poll. I have 1 yes so far, and I have 3 no's, 4 no's. So it's quite a lot of places that we're looking at today. When you see the map, you'll see what I mean. It's a big area. But overwhelmingly, the answer is no. I'll let it go for a few more seconds so we get to 1 minute. Okay, so I'll end that poll, share those results with you. So you see we have 1 person who's been. I would be interested to know which state, if you can put it in the chat. Otherwise, let's stop sharing that. Good. Make our world rotate again. Which, by the way, is the direction that the world actually does rotate in real life. Okay, good. So today we're doing California and the Western states. This is week 7, class 1 of Destination Americas. So these are the states we'll be looking at today. Yes, there are a lot of them. And here are the labels. So remember how I often come up with tricks of how to remember states on a map, or even countries on a map for that matter. There are some tricks. There are some that you just need to remember and just study. But California, that one is usually easy for people because it's probably the most visited state out of all of these. Maybe Nevada is a close second. But California, it sort of looks like a C if you use your imagination. C. Nevada kind of looks like a V. Use your imagination. Nevada with the V in the middle, Nevada, so kind of looks like a V. Then you have 4 states right beside each other, and they all share what they call a quadrupoint. And that means that they all touch each other at one point, and they cross. You can visit that location. And to remember that, you look at the first letters of each of those states, and you think to yourself, UCAN, you can remember this. You can remember this. Utah, Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico. Now, up here in the furthest northwest state of the contiguous United States is Washington. Now, don't confuse that with the capital city. The capital city is on the opposite side of the country. So Washington, D.C. is how you refer to the capital city. Washington is a state. If you just say Washington, that means the state. If you say Washington, D.C., it means the city. So how do you remember the states up here? Well, going from northwest and swooping down and over, remember that if you just say Washington, you mean the state. So look at the first letters of each of these states, W-O-I-W-S. Then you say Washington only is Washington state. If you say Washington, D.C., you're talking about the city. But if you say Washington only, you're talking about the state. So Washington only is Washington state. If that helps you, write that down. If it doesn't help you, ignore what I just said. Okay, good. So first we will go to California today. Capital is Sacramento. And remember, you can find that with the star on the map. There are 3 major gateways, I mean. There are several airports, but 3 major ones, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and San Diego. And that is traveling north to south. You'll see those cities. The nickname of the state is called the Golden State. And there's lots of variety in terms of the topography of it, like the geographic features. So there's sandy beaches along the coast, then there's the coastal mountains that have distinct rocky cliffs, the way that they look. And then you've got the Sierra Nevada mountains in the east. And they're two separate mountain ranges. The Colorado River down in the southeast of the state is a natural border with Arizona. So again, you've got these very distinct borders that sometimes happen, and then you've got a natural border. And the state of California borders Mexico. And we will talk about Mexico in Module 3 after you write your Module 2 test. And speaking of Mexico, I'm going there on Friday. So I'm super excited. It's my first international trip since COVID. And I can tell you, working in the travel industry, it's normal for me to travel, I would say 4 or 5 times a year. Sometimes more. Usually 2 international trips, maybe 3, and then other trips just going around Canada for my work. So the fact that we've gone now 2 years without traveling for the job, it's really exciting for me. So yes, I'm going to Mexico on Friday. So if you want to, you don't have to, of course, but find me on Instagram and I'll post what it's like to travel these days. So here we have Sacramento, the capital city, being circled. We're going to go up to Napa, which you might recognize the name of. San Francisco, and as we go through California, we will sort of go north to south. We'll stop in Monterey, Death Valley. Yosemite National Park, we've already spoken about in class, so we'll visit that briefly. Los Angeles we'll go to, and San Diego. But first, we'll watch a quick video from California's DMO, from their Destination Marketing Organization.
People think Californians are just a bunch of dreamers.
With our heads in the clouds.
Like a bunch of space cadets. Huh? What?
I've drawn a blank. What's my line?
Maybe we do live in a fantasy.
A little bit out there.
Maybe.
But just a bunch of dreamers? No way!
We're just like everyone else.
We put our board shirts on, one leg at a time.
Start dreaming big at visitcalifornia.com.au.
So that's their DMO video for California. And you can tell by the website, or maybe you didn't catch it at the very end, it said .au. So that was designed to be shown in Australia. And so all these destination marketing organizations, they put out promotional materials like that, commercials or whatever, it might be ads on social media. And they're all designed to get people to go to that destination. And it could be a state like the one we just saw, or it could be a country or even a city. Might have their own DMO, their own destination marketing organization. So we are going up to Napa Valley and Sonoma County. So these are, as you can see in the picture, grape growing regions of California. You can see the vineyards, the grapevines there. So some of the most famous wineries in the US are found in this region, in Napa Valley and in Sonoma County. And pictured is a luxury train ride, a luxury train experience that takes you around to different wineries and you have a beautiful meal on board. It's not cheap, of course, but it is something good to know about because I sent a few people when I was a travel agent. I sent a few people to California and they both did the train. Both groups of people did the train. So it is something very special. If you've taken a luxury train ride before, there's something special. Well, there's something special about train rides in general. It doesn't have to be luxury trains. I've taken some very interesting train rides around the world, and some of them were not luxury. but the luxurious ones are even that much more special. So Napa Valley, known for its wine. Now let's go a little bit south to San Francisco. This was one of the cities that had a major gateway, a major airport. So San Francisco is served by the SFO airport, San Francisco Airport. And some of the things that people like to do there as tourists, there's Fisherman's Wharf, there's the Golden Gate Bridge, and there's Alcatraz, which we'll look at all of those. And what you see in the picture are these famous houses here. If you've ever seen a picture of San Francisco, you might recognize these. They're called the Painted Ladies. And there's a park right here, nice big park. So people go there and they like to take the pictures of the city behind the Painted Ladies and the Painted Ladies themselves. Let's go down to the waterfront, to an area called Fisherman's Wharf. And this is in San Francisco. It's on the northern waterfront, and it's one of the busiest tourist areas in San Francisco, one of the more visited areas by tourists in San Francisco. So it's full of souvenir shops, crab, clam chowder. Clam chowder is not just for the East Coast. They sell it all over the place here too. And there's beautiful views of the bay and the Golden Gate Bridge, and you can see Alcatraz as well from the Fisherman's Wharf. There's also something else that attracts people to this place, something very special. I'm just taking out my tea bag here. It's a colony of sea lions. And so here's the sea lions at Fisherman's Wharf, Pier 39 of Fisherman's Wharf. So you can go down to Fisherman's Wharf, go get some food, take some pictures of the nice views, and then stop by Pier 39 and see these guys who are usually there. You might not want to stay too long because it doesn't smell great. Out in the bay is something called Alcatraz. And this is a prison. It's not in operation anymore. It's now open for tourism. But you can see it from the city of San Francisco, and you can go and tour it. Like I said, it's open for tourism. It operated from 1934 to 1963, and it had some of the most notorious criminals, the most famous criminals from the States at that time. Bank robbers, murderers, gang leaders, all of that. And you can go tour it. So in a way, this might fall under that category we've talked about before called dark tourism. That could be part of that. So how do you get around San Francisco? Well, the cable cars are really famous. They are a favorite way of tourists to get around the city. They are open for public use, of course. They bring around 7 million people a year. About 7 million people a year ride them. But most of them are tourists. San Francisco is hilly. Maybe not the best destination to send someone who has mobility problems. It's all these small details that you need to think of when you're traveling. Remember when we looked at Florida, we called it the flattest state. So that would be a good place to send someone who maybe they can't walk very far or they have troubles with walking. But San Francisco, you can send them there. Maybe just be aware that it's not walkable for people who might have mobility problems, but then they could take the cable cars and public transportation. So here we are looking at a typical street in San Francisco, big hill. Then at the end of it, you have Fisherman's Wharf and Alcatraz out in the water. One of the streets of San Francisco, remember all of the city is built on a hill. One of the streets is called Lombard Street. And here's a few different views of it. And you can see how crooked it is. It's turn, 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 turn. And this is a bit further away, all the different turns. And this is a satellite view of all the turns. So it's actually the most crooked street in the world. It's 400 meters in length, and it has 8 hairpin turns. And hairpins just means that the turn is really sharp. And it A lot of people, it is a tourist attraction in itself, and a lot of people want to visit and drive down the street and take pictures of the street and walk down the street and so on. But people do live there. And so it can be a little annoying, I guess, for people who live there, and it can get crowded and so on. So the city of San Francisco has thought maybe we should charge people money to drive down this street. They haven't started that yet. It's still free, but it is always a conversation that they're having. But something that people like to go see while they're there. Something quite famous that I'm sure you have all seen is the Golden Gate Bridge. And there are parks all along both sides here and along where the picture's being taken from, down at the water level as well. And you can get lots of beautiful pictures of the bridge from those parks. So it's a suspension bridge that spans the Golden Gate, which is a 1.6-kilometer body of water here. And that connects San Francisco Bay to the Pacific Ocean. So this bridge spans that body of water. And it is popular with pedestrians and cyclists. It's safe for them. There's 6 lanes of traffic, but on either side, there's bike lanes and pedestrian walkways as well. Might take you a while to go across the whole thing, but you might like it for the views and for the experience. Also in Chinatown, also in San Francisco, you have one of the oldest Chinatowns in the whole country of the US. So beyond the gates, which are quite famous, you have a maze of streets and alleys with traditional foods and restaurants and souvenirs and shops, and it's busy, it's active, and it's an exciting place to be. So now as we leave from San Francisco, we're going to go for a drive along the Pacific Coast Highway. This is also known as State Route number 1. It is it's the longest and the most scenic state route in California. It goes from Morro Bay to Monterey. And you can see why. It's got beautiful views. So what does that mean for tourism? Remember, always bring it back to how does this affect a tourist's decision to travel there? So some cities like New York, you would fly there and you would take the subway. You would take a taxi, maybe. But California, you fly there and maybe you would want to rent a car and drive these routes. In New York, you probably don't want to drive. It's too crazy. The parking is a nightmare, But maybe for California, somebody would want to rent a car. And it all comes back to the fact that almost every job in the tourism industry is a sales position. So if someone says, I want to go to California, you could give them a flight ticket. Or you could give them a flight ticket and then what we call upsell. Give them everything else. Maybe they want to rent a car. Maybe they didn't realize there's beautiful drives in California. That is something you would get commission from as a travel agent. Maybe you can do that. Then you can add on some hotels for them. That's even more money for you. So it's all sales, and that's why it's important to know maybe that there's a beautiful driving route in California. And that's the kind of expert advice that you learn over the years and in these classes as well that give clients confidence. And when I said that every position is a sales position, I mean like 95% of them are. And it's not just travel agents. Some of you might not want to be a travel agent. Maybe you want to work in hotels or event management or airline operations in some way. A lot of it does still come back down to sales. And all of these things are important to know in all of those different positions as well. So let's take the Pacific Coast Highway and drive down to Monterey. And clearly we see here a golf course. Not everyone can stop and play around here because of the cost. You can see it's beautiful, of course, but this attracts wealthier people, let's say. So the Monterey Peninsula is located at the northern part of the Central California coast. It's a 27-kilometer drive that travelers can take around the peninsula, starting in Monterey and ending in Carmel. This stop that we see in the picture is called Pebble Beach, and it's a golf course, and it costs about $500 to play a round of golf there. So, you know, I learned really quickly as a travel agent not to judge, they say not to judge a book by its cover. It means don't look at a person and immediately think, they probably don't have much money, or this person's going to be difficult to work with. You know, don't judge people immediately because sometimes you have no idea. They could come in not, looking not in a super fancy suit, but they say to you, yes, I'd like to go here and I'd like to spend this money to play that round of golf. And it happens all the time. So it's funny because to me, paying $500 to play a round of golf, I wouldn't do that, but it is something that people do. Some people just say, you know what? Price is not an issue for me. This is what I want to do. You just make it work. Death Valley, California. We have talked about this before, and this slide you have seen before. But just to remind you, it's one of the hottest places on the planet, not just in the country that we're studying. The hottest recorded temperature on Earth was here, and it was 56.7 degrees Celsius, and it's at 85 meters below sea level. It's the driest place in North America, and it gets on average only 5 centimeters of rain every year. And it says right on that sign, don't go walking in Death Valley after 10. It just gets too hot. Elsewhere, we have Yosemite National Park. And again, it says it looks like it would be called Yosemite, but it's not. It's Yosemite. This is in the California Sierra Nevada mountains. And it's known for a few things. 2 of them are in the picture. These giant sequoia trees, some of them are over 2,000 years old. It's incredible to think of that. And also a monolith. And that's what's in the bottom picture. If you look to the left of the picture, you see a big, big, steep rock face. My mouse is outlining it now. That is the El Capitan monolith. So you can imagine that rock climbers are attracted to that. And some people do it. Of course, you can see it's huge, but some people do it, and some people do it without safety harnesses. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, Yosemite National Park. Okay, now let's go to Los Angeles. Again, we're going north to south, sort of. If you're looking north to south on a map, those 3 major cities, you have San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, in that order. So Los Angeles, as you all know, is a big city. It's the 2nd most populated city in the United States, and it is along the Pacific coast in Southern California. The coastline stretches 122 kilometers from Malibu to Long Beach, and inland, the city spreads out and kind of expanded up to the mountains. So let's look around a little bit, Los Angeles. First, we'll go to Hollywood. Again, probably super famous. I'm sure you've all heard of it. It is a neighborhood in the central region of Los Angeles. Hollywood is famous for the US film industry and the celebrities that go along with it. And you can take these tours that put you on a bus and you drive around the streets and they say, this is where that celebrity lives. This is where this celebrity lives. And so people like to go there. Lots of, well, it's nearby where lots of the films and TV shows are filmed. So you can go to filmings of shows and be in the audience for that. It's a pretty interesting experience. So Columbia Pictures, Disney, Paramount Pictures, Warner Brothers, and Universal Pictures were all founded in Hollywood. And the most recognizable part of the neighborhood, I'd say, is the Hollywood sign. Of course, in the picture you see it there. It used to say Hollywood Land when it was put up, and it was put up almost 100 years ago. Next year will be 100 years that it's been standing. And it was originally put up to attract people to a real estate development. They were building houses and they thought, let's put Hollywood Land up on the mountain so people will come to it and discover how nice it is here. And now, of course, it just says Hollywood, and it's been there for a really, really long time. Okay, let's go elsewhere in Los Angeles. This is a bit closer to the airport. This is called Venice Beach. It's very laid back. The people there are like just very easygoing. It's very free-spirited. There's really cool, interesting shops. There's street performers. There's street art. A mural is like a piece of art that's on a wall. And like I said, pretty close to the airport, to Los Angeles Airport. Then you have Santa Monica Pier. And this is a bit further north from Venice Beach. It is a center of entertainment, really. So you have rides. You can see a few roller coasters, a Ferris wheel. There's the beach right there. So you've got ocean views. There's entertainment going on. There could be live music. It's over 100 years old. So it's been going strong for quite a while. Moving on, we're going to go to Grauman's Chinese Theater. And this is a popular tourist attraction because of what's outside of it, really. They have shows and things inside, but most people just go to see what's outside of it. And that's famous people who've put their handprints and their footprints, and sometimes they've signed in the cement as well. So that's outside the Grauman's Chinese Theater. Directly in front of it, you have all of these things. Now, around the Chinese Theater, it's a little sketchy. It's a little bit dangerous. So usually people just go there, see it, take a picture and leave. It's not a nice neighborhood, especially to walk around. Kind of the same idea. Important people on the ground. You have this, the Hollywood Walk of Fame. So it actually has over 2,400 stars in the sidewalk along 15 blocks of Hollywood Boulevard. And so the people who have stars, they could be actors, musicians, directors, producers. You see the list of people that could be there. So it's kind of a funny thing to do, to go to a place, to go to a city and walk along the sidewalk. And instead of looking around at the city, you look at the floor and try to find your favorite celebrity, take a picture with it or something. So close to Los Angeles, there's a town called Anaheim. And that is where Disneyland is. Remember last week we talked about Disney World, and that's in Florida, Disney World. But Disneyland is at least in this country, is in California. So it was the original Disney property. So they built this one first. Actually, Walt Disney himself he supervised it. He was alive and he supervised it until it was completed. And then they later opened up the one in Florida, but this was the first one. So quite a popular place, of course, just like the one in Florida. It's not as visited. The one in Florida is more commonly visited. And the way I remember it is that the whole world goes to Disney World in Florida. It's more visited than Disneyland. So Disneyland, California, Disney World, Florida. We won't look too much at that because we had a whole Disney conversation last week. Next up, still in Los Angeles now, we're back in Los Angeles, is a place called Rodeo Drive. It looks like rodeo, but it's pronounced Rodeo Drive, and it's in the heart of Beverly Hills. It's a very wealthy area. There's luxury shops. I can't really see, but I think that one that looks like a fancy bank is Versace. And then it's all those brand names that you're spending like thousands of dollars on a purse kind of thing. So this is where, of course, celebrities like to go to shop and tourists like to go to see the celebrities who are going shopping. Okay, now we're leaving from Los Angeles. We're going south, remember, and out of the three major cities we're looking at today, San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, we're going south and we're going to end up in San Diego. This is in Southern California. It's really close to Mexico. It's only 32 kilometers away from Mexico. The city itself is famous for a few things, including the San Diego Zoo. It's a really big zoo. It's huge establishment, and it's world famous for their programs, for their what's the word? Maybe I've written it down. No, I haven't. But the programs, breeding programs and research programs and things like that. So over 3,700 animals, over 650 species and subspecies of animals. They were one of the first to have cageless exhibits, so no cages. Kind of like if you go to African Lion Safari near Hamilton, they don't have cages for most of the exhibits. The animals kind of roam around, which I suppose for a zoo is the best you can do. I personally am conflicted when it comes to zoos. I know they have great programs with, like I said, breeding, especially with endangered animals and doing research, but I'm not the biggest fan of seeing animals in any kind of captivity. So it's a good thing and it's maybe a not so good thing depending on what angle you take. But it's always good to be aware of the issues and things that people might be concerned about when they travel. Elsewhere in San Diego, you have Mission Bay Park, and you can see this park is huge, really, really big. It's the largest aquatic park of its kind in the whole country. It has 27 miles of shoreline, 19 of those miles are sandy beaches, and there are 8 different designated swimming areas. So this actually attracts 15 million people every year. Lots of people like to stay on the land instead of going swimming, and then you can go cycling, you can pack a picnic. There's 14 miles of bike paths that go through it. And I mentioned already that San Diego is really close to Mexico. What it is closest to in Mexico is Tijuana. And here you have a picture of the US-Mexico border, which is close to San Diego, but it's not in San Diego, and it borders Tijuana, Mexico. And the thing that's special about this border is that it is the busiest border crossing in the world. Over 50 million people cross that border every year. And like I said, it's only 32 kilometers from San Diego. Not that far away. Okay. Remember, if there's any questions, you can type them in the chat. So I trust that there are no questions as we move on to our next state, South Dakota. And remember, when we look at our states, we really only spend a lot of time talking about the states people go to most commonly. So California, we spent a lot of time there because people visit it a lot. South Dakota, not as many people visit as California, but we do have one thing to go see there. So capital city is Pierre. It is home to Mount Rushmore. So there's your capital city being circled. Now we have Mount Rushmore being circled. This is Mount Rushmore. This is what it looks like in the bottom picture. The top picture is what it was supposed to look like. Theoretically, it is incomplete, Mount Rushmore. These sculptures were supposed to go down to the waists of these presidents. So the 4 presidents from left to right are George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln, left to right. And they're supposed to represent the nation's birth, growth, development, and preservation, respectively. If you ever see that word in this context, respectively, it means that the first thing on the list relates to the first person on that other list. So in other words, the nation's birth, George Washington. He was the first president. The nation's growth, Thomas Jefferson. The nation's development, Theodore Roosevelt, and so on. That's what it means respectively. You match up which words with which people. So yes, okay, so the other thing, yeah, it was supposed to go down to their waists. The thing with this is that people find it interesting to visit, and to be honest, I think it would be interesting to visit. However, in 1868, the government of the United States promised this land to a group of to a community of indigenous people called the Sioux. That's how it's pronounced, is Sioux. And then they found gold. So 1868, they promised them the land, and then in 1870s, some point during the next decade, they found gold, and they thought, okay, well, now we're going to take it back. And the US government built this monument, on the land that they said to the Sioux, this is yours, you do what you want with it, we're not going to touch it. So some people go because they're interested in how it was built, and it's impressive, to be honest, the monument. But some people also see it as a monument of the indigenous losing their land. It's like the prime example of indigenous people losing their land, even though yes, it did happen a long time ago, but still, it's important to know that side of the story as well. Okay, that's the only thing that we're going to look at in South Dakota. I'm sure there's more to see, but let's go to Wyoming. Capital is Cheyenne. This is home to Yellowstone National Park, which, remember when we looked at the introduction lesson to the United States, we went through a national park section of that lesson. And so you'll remember that. It was the first national park in the world. It was designated a national park in 1872. And one thing that you find there is the geyser called Old Faithful. This is just one of over 500 geysers in the park. And I've told you my geyser story. When I went to Iceland, I saw the geyser in the town called Geyser, where geysers get their name. This one erupts about every 90 minutes. Now, it is really, really, really hot when it comes out and it sprays. So you need to stay back from it. You can't go right up to it. It is over 200 degrees Celsius in the ground. This is the reason it explodes. And then as it approaches the surface and eventually blows up like that, it's still over boiling. Just under the surface, just before it comes out, it's at 117 degrees Celsius. So not just known for the geysers, it's known for canyons, rivers, forests, hot springs as well. Okay, now let's go to Washington. Remember, Washington State is the most extreme northwest state of the contiguous states. Washington, D.C., the city, is the capital city of the country, and it's way on the other side. It's way over on the east side, but here we are. You can see, related to our map of Canada, we're now in the northwest of the United States, because you can see British Columbia and Vancouver Island. Of course, we've already studied those places. Capital here is Olympia. Major gateway is Seattle. Airport code there is nice and easy to remember. The state of Washington is just called Washington, like I've said already. Washington, D.C. is the city. Opposite sides of the country, not the same place. Olympia is the capital city. We will go to Seattle. And Mount St. Helens is worth mentioning, of course, as well. So here we have beautiful Seattle, the mountains in the background, and the most recognizable building probably of the whole city is called the Space Needle, and that is this tall building here. So here we are in Seattle, really beautiful city. It is located, again, one of those things that might be hard to figure out how to say, Puget. City on Puget Sound. It is the Pacific Northwest. It's surrounded by water, mountains, and forests. You can see in the picture how beautiful it is. It's also a very green city. There's lots of parkland in Seattle. It is Washington's most populated city, home to a large tech industry. Amazon is headquartered there. Also founded there was Starbucks. Fun fact, it's now the world's largest coffee house chain, and it started in Pike Place Market in Seattle. And the Space Needle, a little bit of information about this tall building here. This tall structure is called the Space Needle, and it was built in 1962 for the World's Fair. Now going further south in the state to Mount St. Helens, which is a volcano. Mount St. Helens, on May 18th, it erupted of 1980. Big eruption. It was the most disastrous volcanic eruption in US history. The eruption rose 24 kilometers into the atmosphere and deposited ash onto 11 states, and the fallout from it was very dramatic. The snow, ice, entire glaciers on the volcano melted, and there were mudslides. It killed thousands of animals, sadly, and sadly as well, 57 people. It's still considered the most active volcano in the contiguous US. We will look at other volcanoes, especially when we look at Hawaii tomorrow. Okay, going a little bit south, we're now in the state of Oregon. You might want to say Oregon. The locals call it Oregon. Capital is Salem. Crater Lake National Park is worth mentioning. It is in the Cascade Mountains of southern Oregon. And Crater Lake was formed by a collapsed volcano, which was known as Mount Mazama. You can see the capital city being circled and Crater Lake being circled, where we're going to go visit. Here it is. Crater Lake National Park. It is home to Crater Lake and the island inside of it, which is called Wizard Island. Now, the reason we go here is because it's the deepest lake in the United States, and there's a nice drive around it. It's called Rim Drive, and it surrounds the lake, and you can drive it, and there's beautiful views that you can take in from there. Moving right along, because we might, we won't run out of time. I'll never keep you late, but it's important to keep moving. So let's go to Idaho. This is, well, let's look at Snake River. You can see it here. I wonder if I highlight it. I think I do eventually. So it's right there, but I'll highlight it. Yes, it's next coming up. So Snake River actually forms a natural border between Oregon and Idaho. And you can see it being drawn in red now. Okay. It goes through Hell's Canyon, which is a 16-kilometer wide canyon, and it's North America's deepest river gorge. So when you see the pictures of it, you'll know what I mean. And it's called Hell's Canyon, which is right there on the border between Oregon and Idaho. This is it. Stunning views, really beautiful. Moving right along, let's go to Nevada. Remember, it kind of looks like a V. You kind of have to use your imagination. But Nevada, and that's also where Vegas is. A V for Vegas, V for the middle of Nevada, and it's kind of shaped like a V. So, capital is Carson City, one of those states where the capital might not be what you expect it to be. And most importantly, why we talk about Nevada and tourism is Las Vegas. This is a resort city in the Mojave Desert. And of course, it's famous for gambling, nightlife, casinos, entertainment. Lots of people go there. They don't even gamble. They just like to see the shows. And of course, we're going to go there. So let's take a look at Las Vegas. This is what they call the Strip, the Las Vegas Strip. It's almost 6.5 kilometers long. So yes, you can walk it, but it's going to take you a really long time. Some tourists think that it's a bit smaller. So if they're staying at one end, for example, and they want to go to the other end, they think, oh yeah, I'll just walk it. It takes a really long time. But there's so many different casinos, and most of them have a theme, like this one. You can see there's Eiffel Tower, that's the Paris. Over here you have Caesar's Palace. We've seen some of those casinos already. I mentioned there's one in Windsor, Ontario. We saw one also, I believe, when we looked at Atlantic City. So the Strip is home to themed hotels. Some of them are an Egyptian pyramid. That one's called the Luxor Hotel. It's pretty impressive to see. The Venetian Grand Canal, like in Venice, the word Venetian is like, it comes from Venice. The Grand Canal in Venice, they've recreated it here in Las Vegas, and they've recreated the Eiffel Tower at a smaller scale. But yeah, quite impressive because the whole city is in the middle of a desert. So you're kind of, when you fly in, you just see desert, 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 Las Vegas, making a statement. And in the picture on the left, you see the famous fountains of the Bellagio. And every day from 3 p.m. to midnight, the fountains put on a show, and the show is choreographed with music and lights. So really quick visit to Las Vegas, but we'll move on to the Four Corners. Remember, when we looked at our map, you can remember, you can. Utah, Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico. You can remember. And to find it, you just look for the states that all intersect in one point where this girl is having fun taking a picture. And so she's standing in 4 different states at once. So clearly a tourist experience, but something fun to look at. And as you go around the world, there are some quadra points, but they're not very common. Of course, it's common for just 2 countries or 2 states to border, but 3, there are some points in the world where 3 countries come to 1 point, or states or provinces, but 4 is unique. There is one in Canada as well, but it's really difficult to get to, and there's almost nothing there. But here, because it's hot, it's reasonable to go find this one. Okay, let's look at one of those states, Arizona. Arizona is really high on my list of places to go. It's really beautiful, and you'll see why as we go through. So, capital city is Phoenix, and it is home to the Grand Canyon, Monument Valley, Painted Desert, Meteor Crater, and just dramatic scenery throughout. And you can see on the map that Las Vegas is not too far away. So you can take excursions, like little day trips, into Arizona from Las Vegas, especially to visit the Grand Canyon. That's what lots of people do. So here's our capital city, followed by Tombstone that we'll go look at. Grand Canyon, of course, we need to look at that if we're in Arizona. Then you have Monument Valley up in the northeast. I've just moved my video so you can see that. Painted Desert, Meteor Crater. So first, let's go to Tombstone. And right away, you can see that it's Wild Wild West in those Western movies. This is where that might take place. This is in southeastern Arizona. There is a historic street pictured here called Allen Street. That's where the OK Corral is. And that's where they reenact cowboy gunfights. There are some famous outlaws that are buried here as well. There's a city in Arizona called Lake Havasu City that has the London Bridge. So there was originally the London Bridge in London, England, and they actually disassembled it and moved it in 1967, piece by piece, to the States, to Arizona. And now it goes, it spans this river here. So very interesting. It's one of those tourist things to go and see. And it even still has the plaque London Bridge on the side. If you're more into natural scenery, this is the beautiful, famous Painted Desert. As you can see, it's known for the brilliant colors, red rock, shades of lavender, and it can change color depending on the time of day and the light, the way that it hits the rocks. I also mentioned Meteor Crater. This is actually on private property, but you can visit it as a tourist, so you'd have to pay. But this, of course, was created by a meteor, but it's still there. It's big, and it's more than 50,000 years old. Now, let's go to what I imagine would be probably the most visited tourist attraction in Arizona. This is, of course, the Grand Canyon. You can see that it's a steep-sided canyon, and the Colorado River flows through it. It is 446 kilometers long, and at times up to 29 kilometers wide, and it reaches a depth of over 1,900 meters. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Then we have Monument Valley. I'm going to get rid of my video so you can appreciate the whole picture. These are huge. These are little roads. You can imagine how tall these are. So it is known for its large sandstone mounds, and you can pay an access fee and drive yourself through it. It's about a 27-kilometer dirt road, and it's about 2-3 hours depending how many times you stop and how many pictures you want to take. All right, Colorado. We are nearing the end. So Colorado, we have until 8:20, remember. Someone once told me that the more boring the shape of a state is, the more boring the state is itself. Like Colorado's a square, therefore it's boring. That is absolutely not true. Colorado is beautiful. It sounds ridiculous, but on Instagram there's a hashtag, Colorado is stupid. And if you look that hashtag up, it's just incredible scenery of Colorado and how beautiful the state is. So something to look at if you're curious. Capital is Denver. It is nicknamed the Mile High City because the elevation is exactly a mile above sea level, and that makes it the highest major city in the States. And Denver is where you might want to fly into to visit the skiing resorts of the Rocky Mountains. So here's the capital being circled, and we're going to go over to Aspen. First, we'll visit the Rocky Mountain National Park. And yes, the same Rocky Mountains stretch up into Canada, but they are in Colorado as well. So you can see here a couple statistics of about the Rocky Mountain National Park, 355 miles of hiking trails. There's lakes, there's 77 mountains that are over 12,000 feet, and wildlife, including elk, sheep, and moose. And actually in 2014, National Geographic named the Rocky Mountain National Park as one of its best trips in the world. I mentioned there are ski resorts near Denver, so you can drive from Denver over to Aspen. This is in a remote area of the Rocky Mountains along a river called the Roaring Fork River. And it is 4 ski areas and a nice town as well. All right, let's go to New Mexico. And you might not think about it in your head, but the Rocky Mountains extend into New Mexico. They go that far south, really impressive. So capital is Santa Fe. Santa Fe was founded as a Spanish colony in 1610, and it actually sits at the base of those Rocky Mountains. It's known for the Pueblo style adobe architecture. And Santa Fe is a creative arts hub, popular city for the creative arts. So music, art, drama. In New Mexico, you have something called the Sky City, Pueblo of Acoma. And it's built on top of this huge cliff, and that was a defense strategy. So this was hundreds and hundreds of years ago this was built. It's close to Albuquerque, New Mexico. So it was built intentionally on top of this big hill so that they could see people coming and from that direction at least. Okay, speaking of Albuquerque, this is where you have the Sandia Peak Aerial Tramway. And this brings you up and to, well, the peak. And it gives you a beautiful view of the deep canyons around Albuquerque. It's the world's largest single span tramway. Again, if you're scared of heights, maybe not the best thing to do. Lastly, we are doing Utah very briefly. So capital is Salt Lake City. There are 3 major rivers that deposit over 1 million tons of minerals into that lake, and that's why it is salt water. It's nowhere near an ocean, but it is a saltwater lake. The only way for water to leave that lake is by evaporation. So the water evaporates and leaves behind those minerals, which makes the lake salty, even saltier than the ocean. And one of the results of that, of the salinity, which is a word for how salty is something. So the salinity of it is really high. There's lots of salt. And one of the results of that is that people can't really sink in the lake. They just float on top. So we'll go take a look at that. Here is somebody kind of in a way like sitting on the water. You can't sink. So largest saltwater lake in the Western Hemisphere. Something kind of interesting to see and something interesting to do. Speaking of what to do, for next class, which is tomorrow, remember to go to Canvas, and you should just do this every couple days anyway, is going to Canvas. So there's some new map work there, there will be an activity, and there will be some videos. But that's it, because tomorrow we'll meet up again and we'll talk about Alaska and Hawaii. We have, what time is it? 5 minutes left. If you have questions, please stick around. I'll be happy to answer those questions. If you don't have questions, thank you for coming out, and I will see you tomorrow when we talk about Alaska and Hawaii. Bye, everyone.